Hey Apex Agents, Mobius Y here with another video from Mass Effect Andromeda's multiplayer. Today is another two-part character build guide, and we're taking a look at the rare Krogan Mercenary. Now initially I honestly didn't really like this character. I found it kind of bland and boring because initially I just thought it was all about the flamethrower. I would jump in front of a group of enemies, shoot a couple shielded enemies to lower their shields a bit, and then just shoot a burp of flamethrower in their face to set them on fire, and then run away and let the burning damage kill them. It was very linear, it was very boring, very one-track minded, but as I leveled this guy up and unlocked more character cards in order to acquire more skill points, I kind of developed a much bigger liking towards this character, particularly the build that I have set up here. So what I was going for with this particular build was maximum possible power damage, with a huge emphasis on flamethrower and flat cannon being very good anti-armor powers in particular. So we'll take a look at the breakdown of skill points first, and then we'll take a look at the weapon and equipment and boosters that I put on this character. So starting off with flamethrower, this is kind of your go-to power with the Krogan Mercenary. It does a lot of damage over the time of the flame stream, as well as a lot of burning damage once the flamethrower deactivates, whether you only shoot a short burp for about half a second to set somebody on fire, or whether you shoot a stream for the full, how long can you cast it for? About 4 or 5 seconds you can cast it for. So if we take a look at the numbers here, the burning damage per second after you end the stream is 330, and this happens over the course of 5 seconds. So that's over 1,500 damage over the course of 5 seconds, excuse me. And the sustained damage per second when you are shooting the flame stream is 454. And if you maintain that for, as I said, about the 5 seconds or so, that's over 2,000 damage that you're doing. So over the course of 10 seconds, it applies quite a lot of DOT damage, and it has a 105% armor damage bonus with the skill point allocation that I picked. So at rank 4, I went with the plus 40% all damage. I picked this over the recharge speed, as I don't really think the recharge speed is that big of a deal. It's only got a 12-second cooldown, but that's if you cast flamethrower for the full duration. And you can mitigate that by using certain power efficiency boosters, or even something like structural ergonomics or omnicapacitors for your equipment. So it's not a huge deal. The extra damage is really nice. It just applies more damage over a shorter time span. For rank 5, I went with the extra reach. Increases the flamethrower's range by 50%. The original range of it, is not very far. So the extra 50% range is actually really, really nice. Over the lingering burn, because all this really adds is about another 3 seconds of burning damage, but an additional 50% burning damage per second. So it does greatly increase the damage done, but it's nice to be able to set more enemies on fire, especially groups of mooks. It's much more easier to set them on fire and prime them for fire explosions. And at rank 6, I went with anti-armor, plus 80% damage versus armor. It already gets a slight armor damage bonus when you initially pick it of only 25%, so a slight one. So this really amps up the extra damage dealt against armored enemies. This is great for taking down bosses like Ket Fiends or Remnant Destroyers, and, of course, these numerous sub-bosses of the Outlaw faction that have armor as well. Agents and Berserkers and Anarchists, as well as their boss, the Outlaw Hydra, as well. I like that way more than the Blinding Heat, where damage output from enemies on fire is reduced by 50%. That seems kind of negligent, as a boss on fire will still down you in 2 hits, regardless if they're doing 50% damage or not, on the higher difficulties anyways. So that's why I went with that. For Fortify, this is kind of a passive ability for the Krogan Mercenary. I only took this to rank 4. to try and maximize the tankiness that you can get out of the character. And at rank 4, I went with the extra protection upgrade. Normally, I would go with the additional mobility because I really hate how fortified kills the mobility of the character when you have this activated. But I just got used to this guy being a little bit slower, and it was really nice having the extra damage protection. So by taking the rank 4 protection upgrade, it gives you a total damage resistance of 70. So reducing the incoming damage by, I want to say about a third, since it's not quite the half damage reduction at 100 points. So you're taking a bit less damage from everything, which is really nice. Flat cannon. Now I said in the build guide for the Turian Havoc Trooper, I don't really like this power. I still kind of don't. It's a little bit clunky, but it's pretty powerful if you focus on amping up damage for it. And I took this all the way to rank 6. With a further focus on maximum damage as well as armor damage and some damage over time. So at rank 4, I took the extra damage and force, plus 50% area damage, plus 35% area force, making it much easier to stagger mooks and sub-bosses whenever you hit them with the flat cannon or whenever they're close by if you just shoot the flat cannon by their feet. Rank 5, anti-armor, plus 75% damage versus armor. Increases both initial and shrapnel damage against enemy armor. By default, the shrapnel does not do as much damage versus armor as it does everything else. So this kind of mitigates that a little bit. The initial hit when you first fire the flat cannon did not suffer that armor damage penalty. It was only the extra pieces that would fly out when this flat cannon hit the ground or your target. And then at rank 6, I went with the damage per second, or the Shredder upgrade. Shrapnel inflicts additional damage over time. Over the course of 8 seconds, it deals 100 damage per second, so another 800 damage. So if we look at this objectively, you've got 100 damage per second over 8 seconds, so that's 800 damage. And then you've got over 1,500 damage over the course of 5 seconds, so 330 damage per second. So a boss comes in, and you first shoot it with a flat cannon to inflict some initial damage, as well as 100 damage over the course of 8 seconds. Then you shoot your flamethrower at it, so your flamethrower is doing the 454 sustained damage per second, as well as it's taking an additional 100 points of damage per second from the bleed effect on flat cannon. And then once your flamethrower runs out, you can shoot another flat cannon at it to apply another 100 damage per second, as well as the burning damage per second being 330. So the entire time, it's the target, especially a big boss, is taking about 500 damage per second. And it's just constant damage being applied to it. Couple this with also shooting it with your weapons once you've used your powers, as well as teammates shooting it. It does really quite a bit of damage in a fairly short time span, and it really helps to take down those big armored bosses fairly quickly. Munitions training, I only took this up to rank 4, and at rank 4, obviously, I went with the extra powers and melee, plus 20% power and melee damage, as well as plus 1 to all power cell capacities. This helps you get an extra use out of flat cannon before you actually run out. So by taking munitions training up to there, you get an additional 40% total extra power damage and 40% total extra melee damage, which is really nice. And I'll get back to the melee in a minute here. Now, Rage, which is kind of the survival passive, I took this all the way to rank 6 to try and maximize survivability with this character. So at rank 4, I went with the extra resilience, plus 20% max health and shields, and plus 15 points of damage resistance while enraged. At rank 5, Unstoppable increases damage resistance when performing a kill that would trigger or refresh rage. So you get 50 points of damage resistance over the course of 2 seconds every time you get a kill within close range. That would either trigger or refresh your rage duration. And then at rank 6, I went with this Inspirational. While enraged, other nearby players receive damage resistance. This does not stack with the rage bonus. So allies receive 30 points of damage resistance in a 15-meter radius around you. You also get an additional plus 20% max health and shields, and a plus 50% kill radius for rage to trigger, which is really nice, especially when you think about it being combined with the extra range on flamethrowers. So just about anything that dies right within your flamethrower range will trigger or refresh rage, provided it's the required amount of kills. So when you're in rage, you get an additional 50 points of damage resistance. 15 points of damage resistance, for a total of 85 points of damage resistance. That cuts nearly all incoming damage in half. So the important thing is to try and get rage to trigger as early as possible at the beginning of every wave. That way, you basically just have maximum survivability going on. Plus, more importantly, it gives you passive health regeneration as the wave's going on, which is a really nice way to be able to tank hits. Sorry, just bumped my desk. So it just helps with your overall survivability of the character, because you will be in front of people kind of exposing yourself, especially if you're shooting the flamethrower in really long burps. It exposes the character. Even if you're out of cover and shooting at the flamethrower for its full duration, you're out of cover, you're going to need to be able to take hits. So my loadout with this, I went with the Disciple, particularly the Siphon variant. And initially it was just because it was the highest grade Siphon weapon that I had, especially in the shotgun class, but eventually it kind of grew on me. I quite like using it. The mods on the Disciple in the game that I will show in part 2, I just had a shotgun barrel and a shotgun melee enhancer, but for a long time, instead of the melee enhancer, I actually had a smart choke on the Disciple, and the pellet spread is pretty tight. You can hit enemies even at medium ranges of about 20 to 30 meters. Pretty consistently with the Disciple when you have a smart choke on it. And then for the gameplay, equipment-wise, I went with enhanced munitions. This increases the damage of your combat powers, so in this case, flat cannon, by an additional 30%. So trying to squeeze out more damage with that. You could definitely go with something else like, say, the engineering kit, if you want to increase the damage dealt by just your tech powers by 30%. In other words, your flamethrower. Another really good pick that I actually ran myself for quite a while was Omni-Capacitors. Increases tech power damage by 20% and power recharge speed by 15%. So flamethrower's cooldown is 10 seconds after its initial recharge speed reduction at rank 2. So that drops it down to 10 seconds. So another 15% recharge speed reduction will take it down about another second off of it. So it's a nice thing to go with the Omni-Capacitors sometimes. You could also go with maybe something like armored compartments if you want to carry more ammo, as well as increase your power cell capacity. But I would say the better pick would definitely be grenade capacity if you simply want to increase the number of flat cannons that you have at your disposal before you run out. And if you actually do focus quite a bit on your melee, you could go with hydraulic joints to increase your melee damage by 25%, or quite possibly even a juggernaut shield in order to increase your shields by 20% and your melee damage by 15%. There's a lot of options available. Like I said, for the gameplay, I went with enhanced munitions, but I've used all but 2 of the suggestions that I just gave you while I was leveling this character, and a lot of them work. You could even go with defensive things like multi-capacitor or shield enhancer if you so chose, or a stronghold package. It's totally up to you. For boosters in the gameplay, again, I went with a Combat Power Amp 2. This increases the power damage from your combat powers, namely flat cannon, by an additional 20%. Again, you could go with something like a power capacity mod. You could go with a tech power amp. You could go with a power efficiency mod, or possibly even a universal power amp if you want to increase the damage dealt by both flamethrower and flat cannon. I don't really recommend using a power efficiency mod. You kind of want to try and squeeze out more damage with your powers. It's not a terrible choice, but the only thing it really affects is the recharge speed of your flamethrower. So you can use your flamethrower more often, which is nice, but it's not really as big of a game changer, in my opinion, as something like a tech power amp or a power capacity mod. That's just my opinion. And then the second one, I actually went with a strength enhancer grade 3, because I do use the melee on this character quite a lot. Hence why I have the melee damage enhancer on the Disciple shotgun. And with a strength enhancer, as well as the melee damage bonuses in the rage passive tree, as well as the melee enhancer on the shotgun, the melee actually hits pretty hard, and it only gets stronger as you unlock more grades of this character. For example, this character is only grade 10 for me, but as you increase the character cards between grades 11 and 20, the melee gets stronger, the powers get stronger, and all those tools just get more viable to utilize them to best effect. So this character is only going to get more powerful as I unlock more character cards for him. If you so chose, you could go with something defensive like a cyclonic mod to increase your shield, your maximum shield capacity. I don't really recommend it because the Krogans don't really have a hell of a lot of shields. by default. If we take a look here, even with all the extra bonuses in the Rage passive tree, we're only totaling at 486 points of shields. But the health capacity is 1127, which is pretty significant. So I don't really recommend a Cyclonic mod, but if you like to get some extra tankiness out of there and you equipped something like a Stronghold package for your equipment, by all means, go for it. But like I said, it's not really my go-to thing that I would suggest. And probably your last viable option would be a Shotgun Rail Lamp if you don't really have any other kind of boosters to equip, especially none of the power damage enhancing ones, or a melee damage booster, for example, with a strength enhancer. So those are just my recommendations for this particular build, and that pretty much sums it up. As I said, this character is focused on trying to squeeze out as much power damage as possible and being very good at taking down armored units. I've played this guy fully leveled up against Outlaw at least once, and it is absolutely awesome for helping take down annoying things like berserkers and agents and anarchists, and it's really good for helping take down big armored bosses like remnant destroyers, outlaw hydras, and ket fiends. So try this build out for yourself. There's a lot of options available for equipment and boosters that you can use on it, but you can also tweak the skill point allocation to your liking as well. So figure out what works for you and just let me know in the comments what you prefer to do. Anyways, this concludes part 1 of today's character build guide. If you'd like to see part 2, the link will be in the description below for a single game on gold difficulty if you would like to see this particular build in action. This has been Mobius. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the battlefield. Good luck, Apex.